full meeting. Don't worry. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The time is 12:04. Wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone present. We're going to start with some information items, and as soon as Dr. Ibarra is through with my computer, she's going to present on board policy review and local policy update.
Thank you, sir. And I think I have a lot of friends that are going to be joining me from senior leadership. We are here to do an overview of the policies that were a part of the Texas Association of School Boards policy review in November. So these policies, this process actually began, I'm going to move my slides around a little bit here. It began with a committee of about 40 individuals from across the district, all different personnel and positions, to really look at the full function of a school district. And with that, we had a consultant from Texas Association of School Boards, TASB, join us and walk us through a local policy review. So as you remember, there's legal policy, which comes from statute. That is not adopted by the board or approved by the board because the legislature does that for us. And then there is a local policy that we adopt in response to legal policy. So oftentimes legal policy will give you parameters, but there's some choice in how you implement that legal policy. And so the local policy, which is adopted by the Board of Trustees, is that policy that comes to this body for consideration and review. So during that review that took place in November, we went through a number of policies on the local side of the house and basically looked at what our day-to-day operations looked like, how we do business, and is that in line with how our policy currently reads? And are there things that we could tighten up or refine so that it's more reflective of the day-to-day work? Typically, local policy reviews are done every 5 to 7 years. It had been more than 10 years since the district had embarked on a local policy review that was this large in scope. So you would expect that there would be a number of policies that could have some refinement. We brought a few of those to you at a prior board meeting that had some language changes regarding district of innovation provisions and maybe positions, and we went ahead and went through those as a district. These are the remaining policies that were reviewed and recommended for some type of refinement. So what we're going to do today is go through a few of them. One thing I want to note, though, we talk about legal policy and we talk about local policy. There is another aspect of this area that's called regulation. And while that's not a policy that's adopted by the board, it is more of the how the policy is implemented. And so it's more of the granular detail of how we do business and what that looks like. So when we say that the consultant recommended all of this language move away from policy and move to regulation, it's basically your standard operating procedures. And so you'll see oftentimes it can get a little blended in terms of a local policy, that we've got some particulars in how the policy is enacted that are present in the local policy, and that really it's recommended to move to regulation. Regulation can take many forms. It can be the employee handbook. It can be the student handbook. It can be a standard operating procedure. It could go into board operating procedures. There are a number of different locations for the generic phrasing of regulation, but that is exactly how the policy is executed, and so that is separate and apart from the local policy itself. So many of the revisions you're going to see today are the recommendation of our consultant to move many of those parameters and those procedures to a regulation rather than it living in policy, okay? So certainly there was an attachment that had about 42 policies. We're going to do a very high-level overview of a few of those policies, but certainly any one of those policies that you would like to discuss, there are about 100 pages there. We'd be happy to discuss with you and provide any guidance in terms of what we've been told so you can make an informed choice. This is not for action today. It's only for discussion, okay? And so I'll start with A, and this is one of the first areas where you're going to see some red line. And it's basically because the consultant recommends that much of what's in this policy gets shifted to the website or to another location, that it isn't necessarily the governance side of the house. But interestingly enough, it had the mission, but not the vision statement. So she did recommend that we add that to this policy and then simply leave it at that point. So while that language is still important, it can reside in a regulation rather than in local policy. When you get to policy B, you'll see, or the B series, the basic district functions, a lot of these deal with the board itself and how the board operates. There were no major changes to any of current practice, but again, she did recommend that some of the policies be removed and or deleted, that they were not necessary or could be in a regulation instead. And in fact, BAA, a local policy, the powers and duties, the legal policy provides all of the powers and duties. There's really no other local policy that needs to complement the legal policy because it is covered under the legal side of the house. It's redundant to have the local repeat the legal. And so she recommends just removing that policy because, again, you have the legal policy there that already defines and delineates all of those powers and duties. When you go to BE.
Excuse me, Barb.
Yes, sir.
We did come up with some specific stuff over, I was involved at one point, that it was revised some about just our board operating procedure. So some of this is in our board operating procedure, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then, so are we just going to go as far as things of that nature, rely, I guess, exclusively on our board operating procedure instead of looking at policy? Is that right?
If the legal policy doesn't already cover it, so yes, if it was a special nuance to how the board wanted to function as a body,
Yeah.
then yes, sir, it would go into board operating procedures.
Okay. Well,
That's a
what I
great
thought.
point.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. Also on this section, the B series, there were some pretty, there was a reorganization of BQA and BQB. Those two policies deal with the district improvement planning process and the campus improvement planning process. And while the procedures internally don't change, she clarified a lot of the language. And so while you won't see red line on there, it is completely restructured, but it's the same content that was there. So that could be a little you could misleading that way, that there are no edits, but that was a pretty sweeping edit. But just to clarify the language and do it in a more succinct way. So at any rate, B is a little bit different in that sense.
Would you please go back to the previous slide? I'm sorry.
Sure. A?
No, there was one that said about, I'm sorry, the other way. It was the one that said something about the 25 to 50,000.
Oh, we're going to go back to that one.
Oh, maybe
right
I
now.
accidentally got,
Yeah,
okay, I was like,
clicked
I don't remember.
too
Okay,
far.
sorry.
Nope. Now we're going to go over to the C series, which is Mr. Besaw, and that's all about
okay,
business
sorry.
and support services.
Yes, thank you. So the similar in this regard, a lot of these items are streamlined, or there's things that were put in there that would really be better suited in regulation, or they're already covered in legal policy. The one CE, for example, the operating budget, there's a lot of that is already in the guidelines that we're required to follow as far as the TEA, FASRAG we call it, but it's the financial regulations and things that we have to follow. So a lot of that was duplication that's in that already that we must follow. So that would streamline that one. I think it had a lot of red line in that one. The CH was the recommendation that we remove. Currently, it calls for any purchase over a single item over 50,000 would come to the board for approval. And then in policy, then it says that any purchase between 25 and 50,000 would be approved by the superintendent and would be reported to the board. That would remain in effect. That would go to regulation and be part of our procedure. As it stands right now, how we do it, it actually ends up on the consent agenda, which is then approved again, which is not necessarily accurate, but it would still be reported, but they would take that out of the local policy. Is that
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. And then the CQA is regarding the websites and things. That's recommended for deletion. So all those guidelines would be better served in the regulations at that point.
All right. D deals with our personnel. So we have DCB local, aligns our policy with TASB's recommendation, removes our requirement to issue contracts to non-certified educators. We have DEA local, also aligns with the TASB recommendation. The provision for staff with less than satisfactory performance has been removed, along with the premium pay during disaster section. That does not necessarily change the practice pay or procedures for closing during inclement weather like we did here previously for the ice days. And then DFE local updates our language regarding which positions can accept resignations beyond the superintendent and deputy.
Let me ask a question. It's Monday. Maybe this is already clear, but the part about removing provisions, premium pay during disaster section. I know that there's what I'm asking about, or reason I'm asking a question is because we can't gift money to employees. In other words, if they're not somewhere entitled to it, then we can't do it because that's a violation of state law. So we have it somewhere that we can provide extra pay if it's, or are we able to give additional pay if it's a disaster situation, inclement weather or whatever? Anybody answer to that?
Yes, that's in the policy, further down in the end of it. I don't think that's, the change there does not deal with that. But it does talk about payment during closure, and does say the board will take action, and that comes forward, as we did on the last time the resolution brought forward for the board to authorize that, because that's necessary to then avoid that as a gift of public funds.
Okay, so we're covered there. I just wanted to make sure we weren't leaving ourselves in a position where we couldn't do it because it's not in our policy anymore. So if you're okay with it, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it would still take board action, and it would come forward to the board to do, and that's what authorizes it and makes it legal, yes.
So we just cleaned it up instead of having it in two places. We're just having it in the one later.
So there was a second section on that policy, one for inclement weather days, and the board adopts a resolution. And there was a second section for a premium pay provision. And it was recommended during the COVID times that eventually removed because COVID went on for a little longer than I think anyone ever anticipated. And so that provision no longer needs to be in place the way that it was previously. Any other questions on those?
So which positions can accept resignations? Was it a big?
That is a great question.
So that would be the superintendent.
Oop, hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Superintendent of schools, the deputy superintendent, myself as the executive director of HR, and also the director of human resources.
Okay.
So we're just trying to make sure that, summer vacation.
That y'all have an out, y'all want to make sure y'all have a
Right.
parachute?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the E series. There are just two short policies that I'll highlight here. The first one is EIA local. This policy adds a provision regarding artificial intelligence and basically just says you have to have the teacher's permission to use AI on any homework assignment. Otherwise, it would be considered dishonest. So certainly there are provisions and there are moments by which a teacher would approve that, but you must have their permission in advance before you go ahead and take up an AI tool to do your essay. And then the second policy there is EIE regarding promotion criteria from grade to grade for K through 8.
I think it advanced accidentally.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Promotion criteria for K through 8. There are no changes here, but it just streamlines the policy itself rather than doing kinder to first to second. It just pulls them all together under the same umbrella so that it's a little more succinct than what it was before. And then, of course, that provision is still there for a committee to review each individual student's circumstances to determine the grade placement that's most appropriate for the child.
All right, section F has to do with students. Excuse me. And the first policy that you're going to see there is the inter-district transfers, and we're actually presenting on this a little bit later just to kind of clarify and highlight. And so it cleaned up a lot of the language and then removed an old provision from the class of 22 with Bryan Collegiate that no longer is applicable. The next one has to do with intra-district, and so between campuses. And again, the same thing, it removes some procedural language that we would obviously know and would be part of what we do in a practice level. And so again, we'll be sharing that here in a minute about what we do. And then the last one has to do with student activities. And we removed the eligible student absences related to extracurricular. So we've taken that out where there's no limit. It's not unlimited in that you're going to be out for 100 days, but we've really looked at it because we have kids and want to promote their involvement in all the activities that they possibly can be in. So that's part of where that comes from. And then removes any redundant language that is already delineated in the legal policy.
And in case anyone's listening and wondering, of course, their grades have to be at a level
Yeah,
where
they have to be
allowed
UIL.
to
Yep.
leave anyway,
Yeah,
so.
we're not,
just
no
people-
pass, no play is still in effect,
Yes.
and absolutely.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
We don't change that.
And then finally, under Section G, which is Community and Governmental Relations, TASB recommends removing local policy for GBVA as it is administrative. It's a standard operating procedure to notify media when there are incidents or any information to give to the media. We would do a press release. So again, that becomes more administrative in nature and not necessary for a local policy. This was, again, a very high-level overview of the 42 policies that are attached. Many have a title change or may have a language change, but again, nothing substantial that would change district operating procedures or practices in terms of what we do. It is for discussion only, but certainly if you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them about any other policy that we didn't cover in the overview.
So for the most part, what we are looking at that's redlined, most of that is redundancy,
Redundant or should go to regulation.
right? So it's somewhere else.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, gotcha.
And some of that you'll see here in a second, in the next presentation, you'll see where it's part of our practice.
So a lot of this was piecemealed together. I mean, not by, because
Oh,
it's
sure.
like you said, it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
And so instead of cleaning it as we went along, we kind of added to it, and this is a good scrub.
Yeah, there's a tendency to add additional specificity to local policy at times and it kind of creeps into the how we do business. It just happens. I think it's a natural extension of any district. And so that's why you bring a consultant in and say, okay, take a look at our policies. Is there an opportunity here to streamline them? Are there things here that are maybe even in conflict with how we do business? Thankfully, we didn't see anything that was glaring, but certainly an opportunity to clean up some operating procedures that have made their way into local policies, which provides more flexibility to the district to be able to modify those things as a result of need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm feeling really good about that.
To close it out, Dr. Ibarra, you'll have to come back into the boardroom
Yes,
for the
ma'am.
board to consider action to approve all the revisions. So you.
Yes, at the night meeting, possibly the consent agenda, and we could certainly pull it if you all had any questions, if that's permissible.
Well, this is, I'm sorry, this is also an action item?
Not today.
I mean,
Not today.
All right, all right. Okay, well, I guess the long silence just means no more questions. So, the next item is overview of student transfer procedures, and Dr. Merrill is the primary presenter there, or
Yes,
maybe
sir.
the only one.
My friends left.
And
Yeah, man.
Dr. Merrill, thank you for putting this together. I did
Absolutely.
request it, and I
It's my
really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Yeah, if you have any additional questions, I'm happy to answer them or find them if I don't know them. All right, so a couple things just to start us off. These are sort of just generic transfer practices, if you would. A summary, the applications are open typically from December 2nd through January 10th. We did extend that this year just a little bit into January, and then on extenuating circumstances. So you've got a season when it's open for preparation for next year, and then you've got other things that you just take into consideration as they pop up. And that's, the practice would be very, very similar, but this one's obviously more formal. In fact, we have over 264 transfer applications that have come in during this window, so quite a few have already made their way to us. We do send out English and Spanish forms. Those go out, and I've included this in there just so you could see it in your handout that you have. You have the slide deck as well as the form that gets sent out. And we do have, obviously, a website as well, and I've done some screen captures that you're going to see here shortly. But this is the English and Spanish version. That goes out multiple times. It'll go home in a Tuesday folder. It'll get blasted to the primary contacts information. And again, it clearly has made it out because we've had over 265 as of Friday. And so we obviously, something we are used to having.
How many do we have a norm?
That's about it. Yes, sir.
But
300.
as far as, I'm sorry, how many are approved?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I have to look.
Okay.
Yeah, I can find out. Students accepted in a unique program must not complete a transfer form. For example, if they're in the Explorer program or whatever, they don't have to do a transfer form. You're already going, right? So that's not really what this is for. And then if you're already at a school, you're just automatically rolled over. So it's approved, and then that gets sent out. So if you're already on a transfer and you're still staying at that school, we go ahead and say that you're approved, and you get that letter saying you don't need to put it. Now, we get those quite a bit. We'll get some that think they got to fill it out every year, and we are happy to say, hey, you don't need to fill this out. It's already approved. You were approved last year, and as long as you're in good standing, you're just going to be moved over to the next year. So in second grade, you were good for a transfer. In third grade, you're good. In fourth grade, you're good. So,
And our people do know that because, like I said, we can't say too much, but I do have.
Yeah.
Because
it doesn't hurt them if they complete it. All we do is call.
Well, I had a parent who was told that they were getting transferred, but not for next year.
I'd be happy to look into it. I think from time to time, there's definitely probably misinformation that happens, no doubt. I think as a whole they understand it. I do think as a whole they understand it. And the majority of them, these are not necessarily those types of requests. But again, if a student is already granted for a transfer and they're staying at that school, they don't have to complete another transfer, right? They're already approved. They would just stay for continuity's sake. Now, if they're changing schools, by all means, if they're going from, let's say, SFA and then they want to transfer to a Bryan or a Rudder, but they're not zoned there, then that's obviously where they would need to complete a transfer, and then we would go through this process that I'm about to talk about.
And that would, but once they transferred, they still would be grandfathered in, correct?
Yeah, they're in, yes, sir. Now, we do look at and I'll show you, but there are standards that they have to uphold for that transfer. So and I'll go over them in a second, but it can be revoked. But if it is revoked, it still comes through our office. So the campus doesn't get to just like, oh, you're revoked. So
We're sending you back.
Yeah. You got to contact our office, and we do an investigation, and we walk through the process.
Okay.
Because it's already been approved by our office, so ours would be the one that obviously has to revoke it. All right, this is just sort of the website, just to give you an idea. So if you were to search, it gives you not only some generic information and then drop-down menus if you have some specific questions, and then it shows you our attendance zones so that you kind of have an idea of what it's going to look like. So if just to sort of review kind of what it looks like, step one, the guardian would complete the online application. A committee of district personnel will review each transfer request individually. The child's circumstances are considered when deciding the outcome of the request. And this is the board policy. It's what we just went over a second ago. And so this is the actual application of that policy that we would do. And so a committee looks at it and makes a decision, and then they let the parent know. It's either it's yes. And if it's yes, then we clearly communicate that to the parent, and then we also communicate that to the campus. And I've given you a code sheet just to sort of give you an idea on the back side of what it sort of looks like. There's a code sheet here that we go through, and we'll designate why the student is granted the transfer. So for whatever that reason is, it then becomes part of just our own internal records for PEEMS, that this student was zoned for this school, but they're transferred to another campus, and the reason is the following reason. And so they're all given a code.
Brian, let me ask you, and so if they are granted transfer, then the parents are responsible for getting them there.
They are.
We don't, I mean, that's part of the trade-off, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That is part of the trade-out. Yeah. And that, yes, sir. That goes back to if it's part of a program, we provide transportation. So this is something different than that. They're not qualified for a program. If it's program related, we provide transportation. This is a decision the parent's making. Now, there are, everything is taken into consideration. If there's something that is absolutely, then we would take that in, yeah. If the request is denied, the guardian is informed and has the right to appeal the decision, okay? And then that goes to step 4. That's where the appeal committee, and it's a completely different group of educators looks at it. A lot of times they'll submit additional information. If need be, we'll call the parent, talk to them to find out exactly what's going on. And then that's where that ultimate decisions is.
And who chooses the committees? I've been asked this. Well, so and what are they comprised of? Teachers?
That's a great question. Yeah, so they're composed of district level employees. So for example, we always have one from fine arts, CTE for obvious reasons, and then we have one from athletics. Athletics is a big deal. So
Yeah.
in every district, that's,
Yeah.
students can move for athletic purposes. And so you want a diverse representation on the committee to make sure that you're not missing something. We also have a SPED representative as well. So it's, we do it out of our office, and it's normally got about 6 or 7 different people on there, and they all read the forms, the application, the appeal, and then they'll meet as a group to talk about this situation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Criteria for transfers, and obviously if it's revoked, these are all the things that are taken into consideration as we make the transfer, and then if you're going to stay in good standing. So for example, if you're causing discipline, or if you've got a bad academic history, those are part of what we would talk to the parent about. And a lot of times this becomes a really leveraged conversation with the student. They like the campus, they want to stay at the campus, and we'll sit down and say, well, if you want to stay, then get straight. And that really genuinely works, and the students then have a motivating factor to kind of do what they need to do and stay on the campus. And so all of this are things that we look at on a regular basis that we have to take into consideration. Was the information valid? Did they, is it honest? So if we get something that says it wasn't, then we would circle back with the parent. And again, our office is the only person that can do this. We take these things into consideration, and then we also will look at it to revoke it. And so a lot of times it's a parent meeting. You sit down and you say, look, this is what we found. This is what happened. This is what's going on. I can think of quite a few meetings before we even considered maybe revoking a transfer that we just sat down and kind of worked through an issue. These are things that we would do. We take into consideration when a transfer, the committee's making that decision. Is there a change of residency? Are they a district employee? Is there a serious medical condition, sibling transfer, victim of documented physical assault, bullying, cyberbullying, anything like that, campus-specific programs not offered at a child's own school, and then other special circumstances. So that's the lens at which we would look at it to try to make the determination. And again, they get to write a narrative. Tell us your story. Why do you want to transfer? What's going on? And we want their input before we make that decision.
Bryan, I got information about an incident, and then I never got a follow-through. I'm not sure what happened, so I'm not sure it actually happened, but it did raise an interesting question where we had a girl who was allegedly subject to an assault by a male, and then the advice, I guess, was given to the victim that, well, you need to consider transferring to another school for your own safety. And I think it was, by the way, transportation wouldn't be provided. I don't know if that was said or not. So this is all hearsay. But of course, the question in my mind was raised as to do we have the power to say that if we have evidence that the aggressor did actually commit some kind of assault, do we require or can we require that student to move to another?
We can. Yes, sir. You saw me pause and stumble a little bit when Leo asked about transportation. I don't know specifically about the situation you're talking about, but I can think back to a situation where we did provide transportation, and it probably wasn't something, so our practice 99.9% of the time is what I've talked about, but you'll see always in there we talk about those special circumstances or other special circumstances. And so that's a conversation that we have. So to answer your question, we absolutely can do that. A lot of times we'll sit down with the victim and we'll say, what is it you need? Do you want a fresh start? Do you want to go to a different campus? Do you want to stay at your campus? Are you comfortable with this other student being on the campus? Are you not comfortable? Is the situation severe enough and long-term enough that we need to make a change? So all of that is part of the conversation that you look at when you're talking about a transfer. And again, that's not something the parent would have to submit. Like, we would work with the parent in that situation. Like, that's not where the parent's going on and filling out an online form. We're talking to them. Our office takes care of it. We change the code. We do all of those things for the parent in these situations. We do it ultimately for them, but they're initiating it. Now, sometimes they do initiate it. They're like, hey, this thing has gone on. The campus may not know the severity of it. We're going to inform them, and then we start that conversation and that investigation to find out, is it there? Because the reality is you just sort of have to begin to take what they say and then really go through everything to make sure that that you've done your due diligence.
Well, I would just hate for the only option for a student, a victim perhaps, was to move, but
It's not.
without transportation,
not the
because they
case.
simply don't have it.
No, and we would work with the parent. That's why, I mean, if I'm honest, that's why I stumbled. And I hated to say no when I knew that we've done it, and I didn't quite know how to do that, to be honest. And so that was very special circumstances that we did it for, but that's where it's there, and that's what we do. In transportation, they figure out how to make it happen.
Thank you.
Bryan, I appreciate you presenting this today, and
Sure.
and it's a topic that comes up with parents
All the time.
all the time,
Yeah.
and there's so many different reasons why families, request transfers, desire transfers, and it's just it's a constant thing that we discuss. But I kind of want to mention or at least make known why this is important, or why, and it may be obvious, but, from a UIL perspective, addresses are required for eligibility and to keep us in compliance with UIL. Also, our schools have to be balanced across the district. And so it's, so can you just elaborate on some of those
Yeah, I can.
things?
And so we're getting, great lead in. You'll see there that athletic department's on there. There's a PAPF form that's filled out for any student that's in an athletic program that goes back and forth. And so, we all are holding the system together. I say all, I'm meaning every district is saying, look, these are the rules. We're all going to follow. We're all going to operate in this. And if a kid says he's transferring for athletic purposes, we're saying no. Right? We're gonna be honest on that form that we submit to the next district. So, all of that is just a necessity to completely be honest. And so we definitely take those things into consideration. We look at, how many are leaving, how many are coming, do we have room, what does that room look like? Like you take all of those things into consideration, and you could even say, well, a lot of times they want to transfer from this school to that school. They'll be very specific with the school they want to go to, and you may say, hey, the third grade's full there, or whatever. And so you would counter with, hey, they can't go there, but maybe they can go here. So, and that kind of aligns with the reason of their transfer. It's on my route. I work over there. I can get there. We live all the way 20 minutes away. So, instead of going to Houston, I want to go to Bowen or whatever. I can't go to Houston and go to Bowen because they're close. And so you work with the parent in that situation because of capacity issues. So you definitely have to take it into consideration. I'd love to say that, they're all honest and all the information they complete is 100%, truthful. That's not the case. Often they'll say one thing and then they say something else, and they say what they think they need to say to be able to get the transfer approved. And when you start doing the research and you start backing it up, you find out that actually there isn't anything documented. And we've done that quite a bit, where they say it's because of the following, really bad situation with another student. There was an assault or something, or bullying, and all those things are very real, but you can't find anything that's documented. And so then you start working with the parent of, hey, this isn't documented. So this, it has to be documented for us to be able to make the transfer happen. So that's sort of what it talks about as full-time employees. You have to call athletics. You have to have them at the table. That's why the committee always has, when they look at it, that athletic component of it, and then fine arts as well.
Dr. Merrill, I just want to add just a little piece to the UIL. There is a process, if they're not satisfied with the decisions we're making, that UIL can actually trump our decision.
They could.
I was actually on the UIL waiver board, and we can overturn a decision pretty easily. So if there's an athlete involved and they're at risk of losing their varsity eligibility, we usually lean into the UIL and encourage the parent to challenge it in that way. It's a real slippery slope, so we're not saying that we have a hard and fast line, because sometimes we have our opinion, only for the UIL to ultimately consider and make a different decision. We do not encourage athletes to transfer for the purpose of athletic reasons, because it usually will not end well for them. So our coaches and Derek Rush with his leadership, they do a very good job of helping parents and students understand all that. So I just wanted everyone to know that UIL weighs in heavily about this very topic.
Absolutely.
And there are processes above and beyond a school district.
Bryan, just a quick question. And I'm just trying to kind of establish timelines on this, but so if you have applicants that's between December 2nd and January 10th, and you have 265 applicants, what's the normal kind of turnaround time or feedback?
Pretty quick. So a lot of times we can go through them and it's just, we can check and say it's approved.
Okay.
So the committee only looks at the ones that are like questionable. So you can rule out a lot of them initially, like
Okay.
approved, like, and as they're coming in, Ms. Hutcherson does that. She'll look at them and start saying, this one's good. So a bulk of them are just automatically moved on. They get the letter and we move on. And so
But then you'll have
weekly meetings.
one off and two off, one that come in
Yes,
after the
sir.
fact.
Weekly meetings. So they'll get together for that 265 and whatever's already approved will go through. They'll look at it in one sitting and they'll put that out. And then again, as more come in, they will meet weekly to be able to.
I was, along the line that the situation that Mr. Stasny brought up, I was just curious to know, is it, hey, you missed the window?
No.
We'll-
So that's why I put, when we go back.
And I didn't think that it would be, but just for
It's a
clarity.
good question.
purposes.
So so I put, you see, it says December 2nd through January 10th. That's the bulk of them because they're transferring for next year, right? And then as what Mr. Stasny talks about, that's the extenuating circumstance. It doesn't follow that timeline. We're not going to tell a parent, hey, this happened in August, so wait till January to December, right? So
Sure.
they come in, and then a lot of times what will happen is we will sit down with the parent because there are such an extenuating circumstance, and if we need to get the committee together, we can. But a lot of times it's just like, okay, let's make this happen, and it fits, and we'll just move on.
And those they'll receive their answer back within,
Oh, probably within days.
okay.
Yeah, days.
And that's immediate. It's not for next year.
No.
If you got an emergency
Yeah, we
situation,
transfer.
right now.
And I think we talked on one, and that happened within 2 days.
That's right.
And we had
Thank
already
you.
called. He called, then I called the parent, and we made that transfer happen. And so, again, the campuses in those situations, they rely on us for obvious reasons, right? You don't want campuses making decisions, well, I want that kid and this kid, we don't want that kid. So the district looks at that. That's hopefully district-wide, like everyone in the state of Texas would do it that way. And so when we do that, then we're the ones that grant it, or the ones that revoke it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I will tell you, Brian did it like in an hour. It was done.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And Brian, how is this, do we educate the parents on this? How often do we educate the parents on this? I know sometimes, like Joel said, they don't understand, and they wait till something happens, and then they don't even, the worst thing I hate to do is I hate to go and see it on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere else, that they've tried and they're not getting it, and this is the problem,
Yeah.
and then you make a phone call, and it happens.
Fixed.
But the problem, the damage is already done to us on social media. So how do we educate the parents on, we're not saying you can't transfer, but this is the proper way to do it, this is the procedure, this is the time, and, so they'll know.
Yes, ma'am. We pulled up a couple of emails just to check to make sure it was sent out, honestly, on the back end, and we did see that it went out 2 or 3 times for a campus. And so all of the parents are getting it, but just human nature is they didn't need it at the time, so they hit delete. So they've gotten it over the course of the year, depending on how many years they've been in school. They could have gotten it 3x times 7, which is 21 times, but they didn't need it at the time, so these special circumstances popped up, and then they need it. So it's always, we could always do a better job of communicating with parents and informing them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think as those situations come up, the APs, if they've had an extenuating circumstance, so as they're working a referral and they notice that, the victim, it's been pretty severe, they'll talk to the student at that point and the parents about a transfer. And they'll say, I can't make it, but I'll recommend it. And then they fill out the appropriate documentation on their end, on the referral side, and then we can make the transfer possible. So a lot of those are taken care of on the campus in that manner. They're educating the parent as they're talking to them and through the situation that they're currently going through. Now, if we don't know about it, we obviously can't intervene, which is where I tell parents, if they're listening today, just call and tell us about the circumstances. On the transfer application, there's a narrative portion of that where you just tell us your story. We're parents. We've all needed things from folks. We need things, and we're all part of this community, so just talk to us. If we can grant it and it follows those guidelines, then we'll do so. If we can't, then we'll explain it, and at some point we'll agree to disagree, but hopefully we'll find a way of.
Felicia, go ahead.
We've got 2 of our great leaders with us in the audience, and a lot of the extenuating circumstances is dealt with through good communication through school leadership. So you've got whoever's dealing with the student and the parent, and then you get the feel that this could be a necessity, and you just work your way up through the principal of the school.
Yes, ma'am.
And so it's in the most grassroots level that the communication happens.
Yes, ma'am.
And so we could spend 25,000 gazillion emails, but we have to trust our leadership teams on each campus to handle this on a personal
Yes.
basis.
And I appreciate you saying that. And, I've worked with Kim and Sarah, both at Davila and SFA, and they talk about the transfers that are taking place. They know. And if there's extenuating circumstances, we call, Carmen or I will call and say, look, we're granting this transfer for the following reasons, and here's what's gone on. Because we want them to know what's happened. So the transfer of services and then any supports they need will go with them to the campus. And so yes, absolutely, it does happen. But again, you have parents that, it's something odd or unique that you don't know about, or it happened outside of school and they haven't informed us yet. And so then that's how we pick it up. And again, if they would, instead of going to social media, if they would come to us, then we could obviously direct them in the right direction. And then hopefully there's no social media post. They're just happy.
Well, Felicia, and Brian and I talked about getting it out to the parents. There's a fine line between telling
Yeah.
people, hey, if you want to transfer, here's, just do it.
Yeah.
And so, we want them to be aware, but I think if we make it sound like, hey, you should try this school out. Hey, it's not we have them, we're zoned and for an orderly distribution. So I'm with you, I always like for our parents to know if they need it, it's there. But again, if we blast it out too much, and I think it looks like we're inviting people.
We're inviting it.
To,
We're an open district.
yes, exactly.
Which we're not, in that respect.
Any further questions or comments?
And we're going to have closed session. We can discuss any.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
We provide an opportunity for citizens' comments. Has anybody signed up for citizen comment? And we'll move on to the consent agenda. There's only one item, and if anybody would like to remove that item,
I make approval
you may do so. Go ahead.
motion to approve all the items on the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Benford, seconded by Mr. Gonzalez. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, it's unanimous, it passed. And then we have a couple of items on the regular agenda, starting with targeted improvement plan for student at Austin Middle School. And it looks like we have Dr. Ibarra and others.
Ms. Montoya reminded me, it's also in the student handbook, all the transfer information.
Okay.
Oh,
So they get that.
thank you.
And we know they all read the handbook from front to back, so.
Cover to cover, right?
Yes. I know I did.
It's riveting.
So, good afternoon. I am bringing before you today for your consideration the Targeted Improvement Plan for SFA. So just a little bit of background information on why we are doing this. SFA was identified based on their Domain 3 performance for the 2024 school year, so their STAR performance back in May of 2024. And so just some information. Domain 3 is part of our state A through F accountability system. And we all know that we don't have accountability ratings this year because of the court injunction. But to be compliant with the Every Student Succeeds of federal law, we use the same data that is in Domain 3, which is disaggregated by race and ethnicity, special education, emergent bilingual, highly mobile populations, all these different subgroups of students that we have in our district. And so what the state does is it uses that same data, no new data, just the same data over again to make a federal identification to be in compliant with that federal law. So we're not doing this based on any state accountability. It's all this federal law to be compliant with Every Student Succeed. So because those campuses are Title I campuses, they receive those federal funds, we're here today to bring this to you. So just as a little bit of background, because of the identification, the campus went through what's called the Effective Schools Framework. And we had district leaders, campus leaders, people from Region 6 that came and worked together to, the campus submitted data, the district submitted data and artifacts. Region 6 came and they walked with us through the campus and did classroom walks, met with teachers, sat in on teacher meetings, and spent a couple of days here with us in the district. And then they focused on those 5 levers that you can see there. And this is very different than a campus improvement plan. You're not going to see a student goal that the STAR scores are going to go up by this much. The purpose of this plan, as it's designed by the state, is to look at systems and procedures and behaviors of the adults. So building systems to support administrators and teachers to be more effective and therefore improve student performance. So this is not going to be like those campus improvement plans that you approved earlier. It's a very simplistic, minimalistic plan. It's got just 3 primary areas that we're asking your approval on. And so you've got that school improvement strategy. Based on the ESF diagnostic that we went through and the recommendations from Region 6, we have selected, and I always get the name wrong, instructional leadership development with a focus on observational feedback, that's feedback to our teachers, and data-driven instruction as our overall improvement strategy.
May I ask a question? I'm sorry before I let you get any further. So we're on it for 2 years.
Yes.
But there's not a benchmark. We don't have to get to this is what you're telling us right now, is you don't have to get to this level in order to be taken off. We're just improving it.
We have to show improvement in our student performance, even though student performance is not part of the targeted improvement goals that we have to write. We have to show improvement over the next 2 years.
It's not specified, as long as they just want to make sure we're doing better. So how far off were we from, so I guess they look at the average, and what percentage of schools fall in this category would need this kind of help?
For the comprehensive support, it's generally the bottom 5% in their Domain 3 score.
Okay.
Which, remember, Domain 3 is all about that meets grade level performance, so it's not just kids passing the test, it's being at that college rate.
Okay. But it is the 5%. I didn't know if it was a bigger net than that, so that's pretty.
It's also exclusively those campuses that receive Title I funding
Okay.
across the state, and it's by campus level. So it's a different
It is more
group of
niche than-
students. Yeah, it's a little niche area.
Okay. Thank you.
And so we are partnering with Region 6 to go through this improvement process. And the decision was made at the district level to not just do the 2 campuses that are in the comprehensive support, but to extend this support so it'd be a systemic process to all 5 intermediate and middle schools so that everyone's speaking the same language and that we have a strong system in place to support our teachers, our students, our administrators, district-wide.
And whose decision was that? It's a great decision. So
It's a team.
Just say thank y'all. I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
We did.
It's all Bryan.
And we did apply, because we were identified, we were able to apply for a LASSO grant that will, and we'll find out the end of this month whether we receive that. Chances are pretty good because it's for comprehensive schools. But-
Learning acceleration support grant. They call it LASSO at the state level.
and I never can remember what it is. So, but
You can make something up because we won't know. Just get close and we'll be like, oh, wow.
and so we'll use those funds to help support this process. But we're partnering with Region 6, so it'll be there. And I'm going to let Ms. G kind of talk through.
Thank y'all for letting me shed light on what we are doing instructionally at SFA. I'll start off with that first part. As far as Region 6 goes, my person and both of our persons' name is Miss Meeks. She did come out, as Dr. Moore said, and we did, I believe it was somewhere in the ballpark of 20 classroom walks. We sat in PLCs And then from that, we met to debrief, and that's where we chose our targeted area, which is that observational feedback and data-driven instruction. And then she just came back this past Thursday to SFA and met with myself and my Dean of Instruction. And from that meeting, what we really created was a template to input instructional information. So every walkthrough that we do, we'll be picking a glow area, like what, a celebration, and then what else could the teacher work on. But then we added an action step behind it. So what the intent is, if all of my admin team and my instructional coach team, if we're putting this information in, we're going to be able to synthesize that information and then figure out where are we seeing trends across the campus in our classrooms. And so then she'll be coming out 3 more times before the end of the school year. The next piece you see right there, reallocation of resources and reconfiguration of systems. So focusing on classroom observations and coaching feedback centered on instructional strategies and student growth. Since I've been a principal, my focus has always been growth. I truly believe, we are based off of top performance, but reality is that not every student is going to make 100% on every assignment that they take. So we need to be able to meet the student where they are and then move them. And so that's what I really focus on whenever I talk to my staff. Like, we're just encouraging our kids to be one step better than they were yesterday, to keep improving. And I'm going to go through, I'll read through the slide, but then I'll go through specifics of what we do at SFA. Additional on-campus support from the district. It's been amazing this year. We have our normal C&I walks, which is like the curriculum instruction team and the coordinators come out and we do walks together, and then we debrief and we talk about instructional topics. The superintendent has also added on this campus support walks, where almost all of the cabinet members at some point have come out to really walk the campus, give feedback, ask what supports are needed from us, and really get them addressed very quickly. And so I very much appreciated that. They've assigned a person to my campus, so Dr. Holtkamp, she's been a huge support to the campus in addition to, my normal supervisors and everybody else. Additional support for data-informed decision-making from the district. So student data, student growth goal has been set for each student and is tracked. But then on the teacher data side, based on the student growth goal, the teacher growth goals have been set and are tracked by the teachers. So let me summarize what all that means. So at the beginning of the year, of course, growth, which is a big part of the Domain 3, I believe it makes up 50% of the Domain 3, is just tracking, did the student improve in math and ELA specifically from the year before. So for me, from their 6th grade year, did they improve as a 7th grader? From their 7th grade year, did they improve as an 8th grader? And so again, that's where we focus on growth. Growth is a huge part of the accountability system. And so early on, Dr. Morris and Ms. Chupp and their team, they are great at compiling data for us. And so they go through and they set what we call an achievement goal for every single student on their test. And so what that means is if the student, it is like built-in goal already. So if they met that goal, then their growth measure has already been accounted for and they've met it. So after every campus-based assessment, district-based assessment that we take at the campus level, that's what our teachers are looking at. They are looking to see, how did our students perform, and then have they met that goal, and if not, why? In addition to that, what we started is having teacher data talks. So it'll be myself, my Dean of Instruction, the instructional coach of that content area. And so at the middle school, in 8th grade, it's all 4 areas, math, science, ELA, and history, and then in 7th grade, it's your math and ELA. We come in and I have a set agenda, and what we look at are those charts. Sometimes we refer to them as the Chuck charts because I believe that's where they originated. That's how, since I've been in Bryan ISD, that's what I've known them as. We really go through that data. Then what we have the teachers do is we also have them keep what I call an electronic data wall. And so they're tracking every kid, every assessment. The difference in the 2 documents is one is assessment only. So I'm looking at the test we took yesterday. Versus the electronic data wall shows every assessment that they've taken over the course of the year to try to see, is this student, lower performing the whole school year? What did they perform better on? Just to try to get a better idea of the students in your classroom. So that's what we say. We're really trying to get it down to the student level or the kid level at the campus. We have our my teachers then, we have them select target students. So we know these kids, we believe we can continue to push and move. Not that we're leaving anybody behind, but sometimes that means some of those kids are already meeting their growth goal. So we want to make sure we're focusing on the kids that we still need to move. And then we have a reflection piece. So what support do you need? What are you going to go back to your classroom and do? And again, in that room would be myself, my dean, and the instructional coach. So what support do you need from us before we leave that meeting together.
How often
can
do
I
y'all have
add-
those meetings?
After every DBA and fall benchmark so far.
If I could jump into, one of the wonderful things about the process that Kim's implementing and other campuses are implementing is it looks, like she said, at every child. So regardless if you're a high-performing student or maybe you're struggling or maybe you're just middle of the road in that subject, that student's growth goal, that achievement goal, is set based on how I performed last year. And so I'm expected to get to that same high level again this year, so I don't lose ground. Oftentimes when you have high-performing students, especially as the case with our academies at the intermediates and middle schools, which, by the way, if you put them together as a campus, they'd be rated an A. They're very high achieving. And sometimes we can miss the point that they lost a little ground. They still performed at the very highest levels, but they did lose a little ground. And so it has that accountability piece for every expertise in child, so that we're making sure that we're pushing all children to their potential and not focusing on any particular area. We're moving all students, and it's a tremendous job for you guys.
I was going to say, it's a lot of work, and I really appreciate it. Sometimes we have a problem, and I feel like we say, oh, we're addressing it, we're aware of it, and I asked this a couple of times before, do we have an actual action plan? I mean, we need to change things, and this is a lot of work, so I do appreciate you. I mean, any focus on the kids, of course, is why we're here, so thank you.
Yep. So then, in addition to those conversations.
Excuse me a second, I'm just going to say, I
I'm
also
sorry.
just want to respond to what Dr. Barra said, and what you're saying too, is that it is so good for me to hear that you're talking about all the students, because I know you've heard that from me before, that I was always, for some reasons, legitimately had a fear that, okay, they're doing okay, they're not hurting us, so let's just focus on the other kids that aren't doing very well. So I'm sorry for interruption, but I did want to say that is really music to my ears, and I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So another thing we do also is we have students in those core classes set goals, and they have individual goal sheets, so they're aware of where they need to be to meet that growth goal as well. And so actually what you see right here in the picture is one of my teachers, 8th grade ELA teacher, Ms. Sparks, and she is student conferencing. So that's the other piece we ask the teachers to do, is to review these growth goals after each assessment with your students so they know where they're falling, because perception is a real thing. We talk about it a lot at Safe and Civil Schools whenever you break down different types of data. Perception is one type, and sometimes we think our kids are performing well, but like Dr. Ibarra said, once you hit that master's level, you have to stay at the master's level to meet growth. Meets doesn't cut it anymore. And so through these conversations, it lets our teachers know, it lets our kids know, this is how we're truly performing, and this is the reality of where we are. And then, okay, let's take steps to make sure we're getting better. So she's conferencing right there with her student about her goals. So she, I'm sure, has her scores pulled up on the computer, and that piece of paper right there would be the goal sheet. And then we have them charted. So they shade in how they performed, and it has their goal written in there and everything. And so that's a big piece of the student and teacher part. So in addition, we did our fall benchmark, which I am very glad that we had fall benchmarks this year. So thank you all for doing that. What we're doing now is a tutorial piece. Okay, so we have the data. How are we going to continue to move our kids? At SFA specifically, we have what we call our Star Carnival. It's an after-school tutorial period for 6 Tuesdays. And the way the student, it's very strategically identified. They're very targeted students here. So it was students who needed support in all 4 areas for 8th grade and both areas for 7th grade, because whenever they're there, they're going to rotate through those core areas with their own teachers and some of our instructional coaches to get that support. We're also working on what we're going to call March Mathness. So from our results, we realized that math is an area of need. And so in addition, like if you're not pulled for the Star Carnival, if there's specifically students who need help in math, that is going to be focused for them, and that's going to be on Thursdays. Once we get our spring benchmark data back, what we're looking at is something called Friday Night Lights, where we're going to hopefully keep them at school just like we do for the week, and then do some work Friday evenings. PD, also all of our professional development days are obviously focused on what we call our ACE strategies, so active cognitive engagement, like how are you keeping your kids engaged in the classroom instructionally, and that's where the feedback piece is going to come in. We also have our admin team to help support them instructionally, because they heavily deal with discipline, so they need that support to be instructional leaders on the campus as well. We have them partnering up with our instructional coaches and our district coordinators to do classroom walks. And what that does is it allows them another person to collaborate with to give good instructional feedback to our teachers. like our February 17th PD Day, the plan there is to have our teachers present to our other teachers about strategies that they have found successful in their classrooms. So teachers learning from teachers. We've hired a math tutor, the district mentor program. We have a couple that are now going to help support in our classrooms instructionally as well, like pulling small groups, things like that. Just the more you can get educators in front of our students is obviously what our goal is, because ideally the results will show that. And other things that we do on the campus just to celebrate is we created an award called Taking Care of Business. So that's whenever we do our walkthroughs, we celebrate our teachers who are implementing or, working with their students in some of those engaging strategies. I celebrate teachers instructionally, and I call it my news of the week. In my email that I send out every week, I make sure to point out good things that we have seen from our classroom walks. And then for spring benchmarks coming up, what we're doing is we are working on creating incentives. So getting that student buy-in that they want to keep working for. So, if you've improved or you met your growth goal from fall to spring, if there's improvement, or you met your growth goal, how are we going to celebrate them? So that is what we are doing for that piece. Any questions?
I like all the
I talk
engagement.
a lot with my hands, I'm sorry. Is that what you're saying? I'm like,
No, I'm talking with my hands. No.
Yeah.
I like all of the names, yes, the different activities. I think that's amazing.
I'd also point out that Ms. Rueda, they talk constantly, so there's alignment, even though Davila may not be doing the same things.
That was my next
required to
question.
do the same things. They're constantly in conversation.
Okay.
So there's healthy competitiveness, to be honest. We have very competitive principals, which I'm thankful for, but at the same time, they're very collaborative.
And it's good, because that was my question. It's just hard to get kids sometimes excited about studying more. So if you can get them engaged, then that's just wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, we're actually surveying them to see what ideas they can give us. What do they want to work for?
Okay.
Okay, so then the last piece is monitoring progress. So this really looks at how we review data across my different groups that I meet with. So PLCs are where you have your instructional coach, admin, and then your group of teachers that teach the same content. My admin team, I also have my instructional coaches, I meet with them weekly as well. And then like our campus improvement our campus improvement committee, as well as like my campus leadership team. So all of these meetings focus on instruction as well. In our PLC specifically, it talks about how do you break down the data. Our ICs do a great job. After each assessment, they review the data. The teachers do their own individual kind of disaggregation or analysis of their performance. But what's really neat is whenever you get them all in a group and they share out their scores and how they did, and then there's conversations about, well, how come your kids did better on this question than mine, or down to the individual TEK, honestly. And then there's that conversation of how they taught it and which different activities or questions they may have asked behind it. They also talk a lot about the misconceptions, like the way you can run different reports after you test. You can see what was maybe the question that most of the kids chose, what answer choice they chose, even though if it was wrong. And so then you're able to say, well, why did they choose that? So you go back and you can address some of those misconceptions. Then they make a plan of how they're going to reteach it and then reassess if their kids got it the next time. Our ICs are always willing to meet outside of, we have one formal, like this is your PLC every week, but our instructional coaches obviously offer up any of the other times throughout the week that if they want to meet individually, and a lot of our teachers do take them up on that, even if it's just individually or maybe just one or two from the PLC. Again, we continually look at data. The admin team, what we really talk about there is going to be from our walkthroughs, what we're seeing across the campuses, making sure that our teachers have the support that they need. Of course, from their perspective, sometimes it's more on the behavioral side. If we're noticing any hotspot classrooms that we need to get into more or go address or pull some students to talk about. So definitely look at data. I'm a previous math teacher, so I really like numbers and data.
Kim, I have a question.
Yep.
You have so much of this covered, and thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I've known you, you've always been working with at-risk kids. You have a real heart for that.
Yeah.
And this is just one more thing. Do you think that because these students were third, fourth when COVID, do you think that this is still a result of the?
Absolutely.
Yes.
My gut answer to that right now would be our 8th grade class. What I realized is they missed 3rd grade.
Right,
And 3rd grade is obviously a very foundational
exactly.
year of learning, and we are definitely probably seeing some of the results of that for
Right.
sure. The class behind them, which I guess would have been 2nd grade, you don't see it as much, but definitely that 3rd grade year, socially, academically, it's been very interesting to see, for sure.
It's
I
that way
think so,
across the
too.
state.
Yes.
It's been interesting to
Right.
talk with principals and district level folks and just talk about just challenges from 8th grade, to
Right.
be honest. So that's not being critical of 8th grade, wonderful kids, great
Yeah.
families, all that.
Yeah, sure.
But there's just that blip that we go back to that was just really traumatic in a lot of ways that we're seeing the repercussions of.
And these are the students that needed and still need and will ever
Yes, ma'am.
need the socialization of school, everything it has to do with. They missed that, and it was traumatizing.
Dr. Ibarra and Dr. Morris, would you, is it safe to say that we're far exceeding the requirements for this plan based on all of what Ms. G just described?
Absolutely.
I would
And-
hope so.
I just
If
want,
that's the
I want our
minimum.
community to know that we've got an issue, we're taking care of it, but it's not just to check the box to satisfy some mandate. We believe in kids, and we're going to do everything we can to close the gap and position them for success.
Before there was actually, the TEA did not release the template for this plan until late fall, December. There was already an extensive plan in place going back to the summer. As data comes in, while we don't have an accountability rating, we have results. And so we act on those results and we put in place processes and systems to address where we need to shore up support or do things differently to be responsive to those data sets. So 100%, they have a very extensive plan, as do all of our campuses.
I mean, every campus has some sort of target improvement plan that we've kind of put together based on things we know the state usually asks for.
And I really appreciate that, because I think sometimes parents see this and go, oh, this is, well, we don't want to be in Bryan, but I think you're going to get a better education because y'all are doing a very, very good job at addressing it. And that's what I've always said is, we're not perfect. If we're short somewhere, then let's figure out what the problem is and make it better. And it sounds like y'all are on top of that. So I really am grateful for that, and I want parents to know that we're doing everything we can to make sure we're top notch.
I have an 8th grader at SFA, and I can confirm Dr. Merrill's comments about the parents being traumatized from that whole thing. So.
Poor parents, oh man.
Barbara?
Ma'am.
Quick question. So I know we have all this in place and plans, and we're doing our part at the schools. Do we have any conversation or collaboration with the after-school programs the kids go to? Because I know there's a lot at the Boys and Girls, mostly all of our kids are there. North Bryan Community Center, Miss Rose's place. So I'm always wondering, what are they doing in there? How do they know what their child is lacking or they need? Do we have any conversation with them on what the students might need?
For those kind of institutions that provide such wonderful support to our families and to our students, we really want them to focus on most commonly missed kind of foundational skills rather than specific to the individual child. As Mrs. Geishenslaw mentioned, they have very targeted tutorials after school that are specific to the child and also during the school day. But one of the great ways those partners can help support all of the schools across the board is to focus on math fluency, to focus on foundational reading skills. If those are strong for the student, we can build on the rest. And the more practice they can have in those areas, the better off they will be. So to your point, I know they have reached out before and we have discussed things. We've had conversations with the VFW, with all kinds of other partner agencies that extend support and help to our schools. And that's typically what we give them, are foundational skills that are across all grade levels and content, quite frankly.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? That's pretty incredible, way more than I was expecting. That's over the top, and especially when you're talking about including all schools, all students. Wow,
amazing.
That's impressive.
Well, Mr. Stasny, I move approval of the targeted improvement plan for Stephen F. Austin Middle School as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Gonzalez, seconded by Ms. Benford. Again, any further discussion? If none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, it's unanimous. Thank you very, very much.
Thank y'all. Thank you for your continued support
Oh,
as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you.
Very impressive.
Maybe Mr. Scott should have gone first. I'm selling on first.
Maybe he could just say ditto.
Just say ditto.
You don't have to say anything. Just say what
All
you
of the
said.
above.
We work on
Yes to all
systems,
that.
and so you're going to
Alfred, I
hear
want
much
to
of
see
the
you
same.
talk as fast as she talks. If you can do that.
Hey.
She was slick, man. She was slick.
No pressure, no pressure.
So my part gets much easier here. It's the same first few slides. One thing I did forget to mention, just so you have this piece of information. I am the district coordinator for school improvement, which means I'm the point person. I'm the one who talks to TEA and Region 6 and kind of shepherds everybody through this process, making sure we don't miss any deadlines or any, don't want any more troubles.
Yes, ma'am.
So again, I'm not going to go through all this again. These front two slides are basically the same, but we did do the same process at Sadbury with Kristen Meeks and her team. And so now I will turn it over to Mr. Scott to talk about Sadbury.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking exactly what you guys were saying, like, man, why am I? What left is there to say? But no, so we pretty much went the same route, observational feedback, and we did work with Ms. Meeks. To that end, I think, to me personally, it meant more so of what adult practices can I influence to have the greatest impact on student learning and growth. That was my biggest charge as a principal, and it's not to say that we don't do data, because we've been doing data since I became the principal at Sadbury Intermediate, but this is more about fine-tuning what we do in order to meet the needs of our students. And so to that, you can see the expansion of the administration team to include counselors and district support. So our district support person is Ms. Bricker, Ms. Jolene Bricker, and she's been coming over. She's actually in teachers' classrooms right now, and she walks the rooms of teachers that are novice teachers or new teachers to make sure that we're supporting them in meeting the needs of our students. Focus on classroom observations, coaching, feedback centered on instructional strategies and student growth. Like Ms. G said, we do have the CNI walks, and we just had camp support walks this morning from the district. And not only that, our team has a set number of walks that we do on a weekly basis and that we meet about in our administrative meetings on Mondays, every Monday. And again, I said the additional campus support is from Ms. Jolene Meeks. And as far as the additional support for data-informed decision-making from the district, Ms. Jolene Bricker now sits in on our administrative meetings, and she is there as a resource for us to add any input as far as what she can do or the district can do to help us. And we have the student growth goal, kind of like what Ms. G said. The student growth goal was set at the very beginning of the year based on where the student performed last year in STAR. And so I know it's kind of funny, but like my vision for Sadbury is to engage every student every single day. And that looks different in the hallway, in the classrooms. And by that, I mean, if you can know your students, you can grow your students. And so that goes into knowing our students. That growth goal, when it's set, the student knows where they are and they know where they need to be. The teachers know where they are and where they need to be. And we can track that throughout the year. One of the things that's changed, though, when you see the teacher-based based on student growth goal, teacher growth goals, are based on student growth goals and where their classes are. One of the things that we've fine-tuned is now that I'm in planning period sitting with instructional coaches to make sure that not only are we implementing strategies that have the best effect on our students, but then also I'm meeting with teachers every Friday to look at all students to make sure that we're moving students, and if not, then what supports they need. We too have targeted improvements after school, and one of the things that, when I met with district admin, I told them, I didn't want to tell district admin anything, but one of the things I ran by them was the fact that we want to have our best teachers touch our most neediest kids. And so to that end, we do have targeted tutorials after school, but every teacher, so like say math department, we'll have teacher A stay 1 week, teacher B stay the next week, teacher C stay the next week. So they're hearing it from multiple sources, and we go over those most missed SEs or questions that we missed throughout the year. And those are based on, it could be mastery checks, could be DBAs, could be fall benchmarks. But those are the things that we are addressing, and not only in those tutorials, but in the reteach sessions that we have small group in during the class day. And then also where you have the data review and professional learning communities, the PLCs. So when Ms. Meeks came and we fine-tuned our admin meetings, we'd already been looking at data and how to best meet the needs of our students. But what we've done since then is we've went throughout and looked at the data, and we formatted our PLCs based on the data that we see that our kids are needing help in. And then from that end, we base our walkthroughs and our look-fors on that PLC. And so the teachers know what we're looking for and what we need to grow, and the kids know. And so, I mean, it's really clear. It's really clear. And we have the data review administrative team meetings are used to make necessary, and that's kind of what I just said. We use those meetings to make sure that we're on track to meet the needs of the students.
Well, this all sounds great and all, but do you have cool names like she does?
Actually, no. We have, so we had Winter Wonderland for our reading and social studies night during the fall, and then we have March Madness.
Okay.
It's not original for our madness science night.
It's okay.
That's
it
coming
works.
up here in the spring.
But you have, you might want to elaborate on your teams and then family names and how you have color pods and all the
Yes.
things that he did before he had to do any
Before
kind of
he
plan. Mr. Scott has been masterful
I know he
at
has.
establishing a great culture there for a brand-new campus. It's a really difficult thing to
Yeah.
open a brand-new school. And honestly, I applaud your effort for the culture that you have there. It's bar none. And intramurals
Absolutely.
is separate and apart, but because of the intramurals, you've got buy-in. Your kids are basically no pass, no play in intermediate. So if you want to elaborate on that culture piece, because what you said earlier, I applaud you again. You have to know your kids to grow your kids, and that is his strength for sure. If you want to elaborate.
Right,
on-
yes, ma'am. So the intramural piece is huge. That's our hook. That's what gets kids in. And so a lot of times, I'm serious, you'll have parents say, well, no, we can't stay for math tutorials, but they can stay for intramurals. Okay, so what we will do is we structure it around, so, okay, the kid is not going to intramural practice until they go to that math tutorial, that
Gotcha.
science tutorial. And
Gotcha,
that's
gotcha.
what helps us get the kids where they need to be. And so that's a huge piece of what
Yeah.
we do.
Are we doing this at all campuses, at the other as well, like we're doing
Which part of it, sir?
the whole program, like the?
Yes, data informed and the growth goals and all of the things?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
100%, yes.
Yeah, we didn't know that we needed to do this particular plan until December-ish, but we don't ever just wait to see what the state or the federal government tells us to do. We anticipate and we base it on data, make informed decisions. So last year, before the school year ended, we were formulating plans across the entire district. That's how the campus support walks, et cetera, was born. So we were doing a lot of what we are claiming today well before we knew we even had to do it. So I commend the team, Barbara, with her leadership to use data and to implement it across the board. We felt like, to Mr. Stasny's point, every single student, the most gifted to the most academically fragile and everything in between, deserves our A game right now. So we're working hard.
I kind of want to piggyback off of something I think Leo mentioned, but, I think if the public, whenever the public sees things like this, they have a certain thought or connotation, but they don't see this side of it. And, I've, been on the board now for 4 months. And whenever whenever I hear, it flies by, but whenever I hear one side of it, but then I sit in this chair and I hear what Ms. Giesenslag said, I'm blown away. And I hope that, and I wish that the public saw this side of it, because I think with that comes a certain comfort level that, okay, we're aware of it, but we are more than on top of it. And so I just want to say that it's
Thank
it's
you.
always impressive to hear these things, so.
Yes,
And
sir.
each campus did, as part of the development process, I should have said this, did have multiple public meetings where they brought their plans to a group of parents that came to, that was part of the process. So,
If these students have to take STAR, there's no telling, between now and their senior years. But there's just that much more preparation that they will get out of this for any standardized test taking that they will have to graduate. And so you're accomplishing so much more with these students that need more. So it's like because these are the marginalized kids. The others they're coasting. But this hard work will really pay off in dividends as they grow and then have to take, those standardized tests in the future.
You know what's nice about that, Ms. Waller, is it transfers the ownership for your learning and your progress to the child,
Right.
which is a really impactful thing. If you can do that at a young age, where you transfer, where the child owns their data sets. Both principals have spoke about how the students track their goals.
Right.
So whether you're high achieving in one subject and maybe you're struggling in another, you're tracking your own progress and you're reaching goals that are achievable. That's one. You set realistic goals, but that are a stretch for you, and that you are looking to get to that point. And you're there partnering and consulting with your teacher on what do I need to work on to move up that level. That those individual conversations that Mrs. G had on the screen, that photo of the teacher doing a consult with the student. That's what you want for every child, right? You want every professional to sit with the child and give them some feedback. How can I get better? And when you can transfer that ownership, and as Mr. Scott has done so masterfully, hook them with intramurals. And if you want to go to intramurals, then let's take a look at your growth data. Where are you at? Let's do your tutorials. You make it meaningful to them and you connect with them. I think that will pay huge dividends as they grow into their high school years and beyond, that they know how to set goals and achieve them.
In my little dream world, I want these willing students, willing parents, and a willing teacher who maybe even someday we can save more money for you to do the extra. We've got now a week-long fall break. We always have had spring break. In my dream world, it's 2 days, at least 2 days of that. You're going to come to school, and it's going to be a full day for you, and the teacher's going to be there on a very low student-teacher ratio, and is going to get extra pay, and we're going to get these kids, the ones that are, well, they're fine. I mean, we're talking about all kids, but I'm talking about the ones that truly have the needs and missed a lot of school, whatever the thing is. And of course, the reason I'm keep using the word dream is because sometimes, you've already alluded to it, that sometimes maybe the parents are just not that concerned about academics. They're more concerned about other things. And we need to make sure those parents understand that the real world out there is really way more about academics than it is about sports. Yes, there are a few that make it to the big time, but not very many. And that includes this summer too. I know we do stuff in the summer. I just always wonder, is it really enough? And that's a discussion for another day, and the legislature someday will actually come through and say, wow, we need to give y'all some more money because y'all got all the tough to educate kids. Again, I'll use that word dream world one more time, but I hope that we can do what you all need to maybe provide you with even more opportunities to do these wonderful things that y'all are talking about. So.
And Mr. Scott, I'd just like to say, you're doing a great job. I'm just giving you a hard time. So just want you to know. Ask Bryan if
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Because you'd be very bored.
No, I'm once again just blown away, impressed with what y'all are doing. I just want to give y'all all the tools that you need.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've got another motion, unless there's more questions.
I move approval of the targeted improvement plan for Sadberry Intermediate School as presented.
Second.
All right, motion made by Ms. Waller, seconded by Ms. Benford. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I said aye too, and that's unanimous. It passed. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys for your continued
Great job.
support.
Thank you.
We will now convene in closed session to discuss, my understanding, just one of the 4 topics. It's the discussion regarding intruder detection audit and correction action plan under Texas Government Code, Chapter 551.076. The time is now, looks like 1:27. Board reconvened in open session at 2:02 PM. No action was taken, and we are now adjourned.
Thank you all. I've been on here 4 minutes. Dude, it's been 2.
Yeah.
Okay.